and change your mindset from always focusing on the problems, seeing the problems, but not focusing on them, and actually focusing on the solutions to those problems and how we can turn those into business ventures.
Leaders Talk, Season 2.
Hello, everybody. Hello and welcome. Welcome back. It's your favorite time of the week. It's my favorite time of the week. Guess what? It's time for Leaders Talk. I am here again, your host, Andrew Dupe, Head of Communications here at Leaders Brands. And today I have as my guest, Adeolu Adewumi-Zer. And I got her name right. We worked on that before we even got here. Adeolu has been a global strategist and champion of African excellence for over 25 years. And as the founder of Zer Consulting Africa, she empowers leaders and businesses across the continent to achieve sustainable growth and impact. Having spearheaded strategic initiatives across Africa before leading a major financial institution in Nigeria, Adeolu has earned numerous accolades for her insights and unwavering commitment to excellence. A mother of two global Africans, her Afro-Optimism extends beyond business, and she advocates for financial inclusion, gender equality, and quality education. She is also the author of Afro-Optimism Unleashed, Scaling African Excellence to the Global Stage, and she's here to talk about that book with us today. Adeolu, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. This is going to be great because we've actually had another episode about essentially African development and development of Africa. We're going to put it right with you. So this is a really good opportunity to have some deep dive for our audience about some things that maybe they perhaps don't really know about. So, with your CV there in mind, kind of introduce yourself to your audience and let us know exactly what you do.
Thank you, Andy, and it's really great to be here. Always have a special spot in my heart for the U.S. where I grew up, even though myself, I'm based right now in Lagos, Nigeria. And the first thing I tell folks when they meet me, if they haven't met me before, is that I call myself an Afro-Optimist. And so the name of my book was not an accident, Afro-Optimism Unleashed, because Afro-Optimism has been a part of my brand for a number of years now. And a passion for Africa has been in my DNA from the beginning. So I grew up in the US. I was born in Nigeria, grew up in the US, grew up in rural town, Pennsylvania. If anyone who's familiar with Penn State, my dad was a professor at Penn State, and I'm a Penn State alum. And started my career in the US. So I worked in the US for 8 years before leaving in 2008. So it's already been 17 years. I mean, time flies. I started out as a consultant, moved over to Europe as a consultant, and then joined one of our biggest clients, or our biggest client at the time, which is Allianz, which is a Germany-based financial services powerhouse, and stayed with them for another decade in 4 different countries. So starting out in Munich, Germany, in their head office, being asked to go to Istanbul for a couple of years, going back to Germany, and then finally landing back in my home continent, then based in Nairobi, running mergers and acquisitions for Allianz out of Nairobi, and then finally coming back during COVID to Lagos, to Nigeria. I was a COVID CEO, ran Allianz in Nigeria for 2 years before going out on my own.
Excellent.
Well, that's me in a nutshell.
Well, what I'm interested in, tell me a little bit about the concept of Afro-Optimism, just to kind of give our audience an idea of exactly, what you're all about.
Yeah, so Afro-Optimism, people talk about optimism, realistic optimism, cautious optimism, etc. I tell folks that I'm an optimist at the heart, but I'm a realistic optimist, meaning that I see the problems out there. I'm not here to ignore them and say that Africa as a continent and Nigeria as a country within the continent doesn't have its challenges, and not overlooking those, but being able to overlook and see past those challenges and to understand the potential that we have as a nation, as a continent, and seeing my children, who I consider global Africans, they're half Nigerian, half Turkish, and knowing that the future that I want to build for them has to be better than the present. And so what can I do to build that future for them?
Yeah. I think what a lot of people don't really understand about Africa is how much untapped resources, power, it exists within the continent that could enrich it with the proper investment and with the proper backing. So, yeah, tell us a little bit. I mean, about that is, what do you see as the future of the continent with the ability to actually engage in optimism and get past some of the stereotypes that maybe the West is holding against it?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, uh, which I get asked even by Africans themselves. So
Right.
when people understand that I've grown up, where they hear my accent and they hear clearly that I've grown up outside, and so they're always curious and questioning you. Why would you come back? You have a U.S. passport. You worked in Europe, and for some reason you thought that this was the place to be. And sometimes when you're too close to something, it's hard to see what's right in front of your nose. But there's a reason that foreigners come, and there are a lot of foreigners who are based in Nigeria, based across the continent, and have no desire to leave, and are thriving in this environment. And so why are these folks thriving? Because they're able to see beyond the maybe the poverty that's right around the corner, or the lack of infrastructure, or the fact that lights keep powering, and we need generators to bring in power, and able to see those challenges as a potential for solutions. And wherever there's a potential for a solution, there's potential for business. And when
Right.
there's potential for business, there's a potential to make money. And we love money. So I think what it really is for us to change our mindset. And so that's again going to that Afro-optimism approach. It's a mindset, and change your mindset from always focusing on the problems, seeing the problems, but not focusing on them, and actually focusing on the solutions to those problems and how we can turn those into business ventures.
Right. Yeah, and that tends to be a problem. There's a lot of pessimism in Africa, and again, I've had been talking quite a bit to other authors who have been writing on Africa, and that's something that they continually mention is that in Africa itself, there isn't the idea of we have a bright future. There isn't the idea of we're ever going to be able to do anything to advance beyond the position that we're in because they're isolated. They're isolated, and stereotypes have been built and built and built against them that in which a lot of Western people don't want to invest, even though there's a lot of opportunity. So how do we break that? I mean, what's the path that we take to actually be able to get practical solutions to begin to move Africa more into self-sustainability?
For me, it's three things. I'm a professor's daughter, so it's going to come down to education.
Yeah,
And really changing the educational systems and educating people in the right way, which is a global problem actually in today's
it
world.
is
How do we
absolutely.
change and shift our educational systems for the future?
Hmm.
And then the second thing is leadership. Leadership starts at the top, and by the top I don't mean politicians and presidents and political systems. Yes, they have a huge influence on the economy and the future of the direction of the world. And we see that more and more every day. But let's set politics and the government aside. And what are business leaders? What are community leaders? What are we as individuals, family leaders, doing to build a better future and to make that change, right? The change starts with us. And then thirdly, I'll go to business. I'm a firm capitalist, although I believe with profit with purpose.
Right.
So, really looking at, not pure capitalism, but how business for good, and how can we use capitalism for the benefit of our societies and benefit of our communities. So education, leadership, and business, that's how we will shift the narrative.
And that's something, and again, is a historian I read many times. The problem with politics and with continually relying on politics, what a lot of people try to do is that, you know, you'll maybe occasionally have the great leader that'll come up and actually have real solutions and real ideas and want to implement things. But you have to have people that are educated, like you say, that are able to then make better decisions as it goes forward. Because when you have lack of education, and when you have the kind of lack of education that we see in Africa, is true, at least in my opinion, from that I've seen, that they then can be manipulated by others. That, you know, the great leader will come, but then someone else after will say, well, I'm following in his footsteps, but he's not. And then comes corruption, and then comes graft, and then comes the problems that have really been endemic of Africa ever since the end of the colonial era, that begins to keep everything back. So what are ways that we can educate? I mean, or do you agree with that, number one? And then number two, what are some practical solutions that we're thinking of in the near term that might be able to change some of those things?
I definitely agree with you on the educational piece, and I think that some of it is intentional. You know, I don't want to get political here.
Well, yeah, we're not going to go on that.
But you know, you're a historian, so
Yeah.
you know, we see numerous cases where strong men, let's use that term, you know, neutral but understood, will intentionally dilute the educational system,
Right.
because it's easier to control people who are uneducated,
Mhm.
right? So if you want to change the system, you need to educate your community, your society. How do we do that? I will fully profess that I don't have the magic bullet, right? If I did, then I'd probably
If we did, we'd be calling the Nobel Committee engineer.
exactly. So and so, you know, it's something that I've thought about. I lived in Germany for almost a decade, and while I have many concerns about the German educational system, what I do like is their apprenticeship program, in terms of realizing that education is not just formal education. It's not just book learning, right? There are different forms of education, and you know, uh, Nigerians, especially my part of Nigeria, tend to really focus on book learning and formal education. And you'll find many Nigerians in diaspora who will have multiple PhDs and multiple masters, and we tend to
Oh
be the
yeah,
most educated in the US and in other parts of the West. However, what we forget is that we need, just like we need doctors and lawyers and engineers, we also need plumbers. We also need electricians. We also
Mhm.
need mechanics. My husband is complaining constantly that he can't find a good mechanic in our city of 25 million people, right? And these are roles, or a barber or a salonist, or all these kind of roles that maybe some people see as, you know, looked down upon and see as blue collar, but are vital to the progress in the economy. And I think Germany is a prime example of where they have seen this as two valid paths. One, the formal education college route, and other, the more the apprenticeship, workmanship role, which is as respected. And when it's as respected, then of course, respect comes with compensation, and you have a viable path. Not everyone can go to college. There's just a limitation. Even in the place with the most universities out there, I don't know which country that is, there's going to be a cap on the number of people you can get into the university. So what do you do with the rest of those people? Are you saying that they're not a viable part of society? They're very much so, because we need all these different people. And actually, you'll find in a down economy, it's actually those kind of professions that do the best. Because
Always.
as a woman, as little money as I have, I will get my hair done. And you see that everywhere. So
Right.
the salon will always be in business.
I mean, I always joke. I have a very old friend that you know. I went to university for history and English. He went to vocational school. He makes far more money than I do with those skills. But you know, that's the thing. Even in the United States, there is a strange look that we give to the vocational education and to learning a trade, where it used to be something that was extremely important that people looked at as almost a goal in many cases. Now, with the United States as kind of a service economy, it's not looked at it as nicely anymore. It's looked at, yeah, that's what you do if you can't get your office job or
Exactly. If you can't make it.
how important it is. So, is it going to be investment? Is it going to be investment? Is it going to be the return of the diaspora back to Africa that's required to actually start bringing in finances and actually to be able to build this, or is it going to be kind of the other way around, where we need to find ways to get education up with however we do it, a chicken or an egg kind of thing? You know, what do you think is the best first step? Maybe not the golden ticket, but the best first steps to get going.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the diaspora, because the diaspora is the African diaspora, and diasporas in general are powerful agents and can be powerful agents in the economic growth of their home countries, of their home economies. And so I think governments have to do a better job of tapping into the diaspora. So it's not necessary that everyone comes back, right? Capital can flow without people flowing, right? And knowledge even and mentorship and training can flow without people moving, particularly in 2025, post-COVID. Everyone understands how virtual the world has become. And there's a lot that we can do. I mean, you being in Alabama, me in Nigeria, I mean,
Right.
think how fabulous that is, right? So I do think that diaspora has a huge role and responsibility in pushing a new narrative around education, leadership, and business. So all the three areas, but can't be fully the role of the diaspora. So if the diaspora comes in with all their thoughts and thought leadership, and the people on the ground are either not willing or not open, or perhaps it's just not the right ideas, because the diaspora are outside, people on the ground are inside, so they're closer to the problems. So you need that partnership between the two. You need the partnership between homegrown talents and people from outside and from the diaspora.
And that's right. Because if it doesn't happen, then it's not a diaspora; it's a brain drain. And
exactly.
then you're getting back into the same problem. If you continue to have a brain drain, if everyone leaves, no one comes back, no one invests, or no one finds people to start, and it does, then you're basically just leaving it behind. So what were your goals? Obviously, I mean, I think we've been kind of talking about that, but when you decided to actually write the book, what do you want people to really get out of it, and with this concept of Afro-Optimism and maybe some of the practical ideas that you're presenting right now?
Yeah, so after I left Allianz and left the corporate world, I knew that, so my goal, my North Star had always been to come back to Africa. So I knew I didn't want to go back to the US. I knew I didn't want to go to Europe. But the question became, now that I was on the continent, what was the next North Star? How can I actually make my impact? And so that's when I founded Zer Consulting Africa as a strategy management consulting firm, purpose-driven, working with SMEs to build what we call African excellence. Now, we're a small company, only 2 years old. We can't work with everyone. We don't want to work with everyone, but we do know that it takes a collaborative effort to make the shift that we know that we need to make. So we wanted the book to be a way for everyone to be able to access, theoretically, to be able to access the thoughts that we had and the leadership that we want to provide around how to scale that African excellence. So we go through, so the same consulting advice that we give to our clients, we go through in the book what we call our scale framework. Goes around strategy, around people, leadership, corporate governance, and impact. And so we spell that all out in the book. Even put different templates. We give case studies, etc. And really, someone could just take the book and theoretically implement it themselves. of course, always welcome for them to come to their consultant Africa to support with the implementation. But in theory, you could just order the book from Amazon or from your local bookshop and then implement those ideas.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, for a small company, your footprint is getting very large, and we're seeing Afro-Optimism Unleashed being mentioned in multiple places, so it's getting some traction. Definitely Google's paid attention. So I mean that's a really good first step then, to actually get that into their hands so they can learn a little bit more about you and then perhaps engage with you and begin to actually work towards the future that you're talking about.
Exactly. We even include, so that we have a self-assessment tool that we offer to our clients and offer actually to the ecosystem. We include a link to that in the book as well. When we have bi-weekly master classes where, as a benefit of attending, you actually receive a link to the PDF of the book. So we're not trying to sort of ring fence this knowledge. We want the knowledge to be out there. We want everyone to succeed. We can only succeed and together and shift Africa together.
Right. And hey, we talked about what would the first steps be. Maybe this is the first step. maybe that Nobel Prize Commission will be talking in a few decades. But so as we kind of wrap up here, is there anything we've left out that you kind of want the audience to take away? Maybe just a golden nugget, or just something that you want them to know that maybe they just don't think about.
Yeah, so when you're building a business, one of the first things you want to look at is your strategy. So, and which sometimes people are working so fast, they forget to think about where am I actually headed? And an example that I like to use, and I don't recall if I put in the book, is Alice in Wonderland. Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland, which was a very beloved book when I was growing up. I hope it still is. And there's
it is, don't worry.
Okay. And there's a moment in there where Alice meets Cheshire the Cat, who is an infamous character in the book. And she's at a junction and she asked Cheshire the Cat which way should she go. And Cheshire the Cat asked Alice, well, where are you headed? And Alice says, well, it doesn't really matter. And so Cheshire asked her, well, if you don't know where you're headed, it doesn't really matter which way you go. And so that's what I want to leave with our listeners and our viewers, is that understanding where you're headed is a critical first step in building a scalable business. Because if you don't know where you're headed, you don't know whether you're going in the right direction. And that applies not just to business, but also to career as well.
I think it's a wonderful note to leave everybody with. And yeah, Cheshire the Cat, my cat approves too. Nobody can see it, but she gives her approval. She gives her approval on that one. So Adeolu, how can our audience find out a little bit more about you?
So I'm very active on social media, particularly LinkedIn. So just search my name on LinkedIn, Adeolu Adewumi-Zer. You'll find me there. Zer Consultant Africa as well. Also, you can find us at zerconsulting.com. Instagram, YouTube at Zer Consult, and of course Amazon. You can find my book Afro-Optimism Unleashed and find me that way.
Fantastic. And ladies and gentlemen, as always, those links are down below. Adeolu, this was great. I think we could have gone on for longer. I know I always say that. My audience is probably tired of hearing about it, but it's true. So yeah, if you're up for it, maybe we'll have you back on in a few months and see how things have gone from here.
That would be excellent. Thank you, Andy.
Great. And we love having you.